Surveillance cameraman. Recognizable around Seattle, he is the guy who shows up with a handheld video camera, laconically films, and then posts the results on YouTube. His view count is as impressive as his filming is annoying. It's annoying in two ways: one is interesting, the other isn't. The uninteresting annoyances occur when he arrives with a camera in a situation which would be bothersome even if he weren't filming. As happens here.
Excuse me, I'm trying to have a private conversation. Could you respect that? It's a private conversation. Leave.
Then there are the interesting annoyances. They occur when surveillance cameraman stands somewhere that no one would object to if it weren't for the filming camera. The only difference between an unremarkable moment and tense conflict is that he's watching another not just with his eyes, but with a camera lens. Here's an example outside a drugstore.
I don't really care for other people to just be taking a random video of me.
Here are some of the central ethical questions surrounding surveillance cameraman as he films strangers in Seattle. There are at least 3 differences between looking and filming. Each distorts reality. One involves witnessing. In a sense, surveillance cameraman only lets others see what he saw. It's true that there are many of those others, but one, or many, play the same role. They don't provide different perspectives like multiple witnesses at a crime scene. That's the ironic sense in which filming is distorting. It creates multiple witnesses without creating multiple perspectives. Another distinction involves control and these two realities. One where you're seen leaving a drugstore at a moment you choose. And, another where you're witnessed on demand, anytime, by anyone on YouTube. Underneath everything else, maybe it's this loss of control that drives the biker to spit in surveillance cameraman's face. Finally, filming means that a scene initially occupying a passing moment transfers into a very different kind of time, which is paradoxical, but not contradictory. On one side, because the recorded scene never changes, it's timeless, there's no past and no future. On the other side, even though there's no past and future, the time of the recording goes forward or backward. It pauses, and can be spliced and rearranged. This is outside the Seattle Children's Research Institute.
But you can't take a video inside private property.
Yeah, I'm not inside there.
Oh, you're taking a photo of what? Because I'm sitting right there. You didn't ask, could you take a picture of me? And you still have me on camera. And that's not okay with me.
Okay.
That's an invasion of my privacy and my time.
Aren't there cameras in there?
No, sir. But you're taking a picture of me.
What's that?
Take, sir?
What's that one?
No.
I don't really care for other people to just be taking a random video of me. Didn't you just come out of the drugstore? Yeah. They have cameras in there. So?
If people freely submit to the anonymous filming of machines tucked into the ceiling corners of offices, stores and elevators, can they reasonably object to a single man pointing a camera? Possibly, because filming and posting films are two different things. Part of the reason people accept ubiquitous security cameras is that they're reasonably confident, or, at least hopeful, that the video won't ever be posted anywhere. Instead of being viewed, it will sit for a while in digital storage and eventually be deleted. That confidence does not exist when someone pulls out a camera. So, what gets revealed when people willingly live under the eye of surveillance cameras, but also object to surveillance cameraman? Part of what's seen is the truth. The man behind the camera makes explicit the filming that's invisibly happening in the background nearly everywhere we go. It's also easy to see why objecting to surveillance cameraman is funny. The basic definition of humor is the juxtaposition of the reasonable with the absurd, and it doesn't get much more blatant than this. People who live under constant surveillance melt down after 30 seconds of being filmed. But, it's not quite right to assert that people who object are entirely caught in a laughable contradiction. It can also make sense to reject surveillance cameraman while accepting surveillance cameras because there's a difference between the kind of filming which is done in order to be eventually deleted, and the kind of filming which is meant to be exhibited.
Business leaders. Excuse me.
What's up?
What are we doing here?
Oh, I'm taking a video.
There's a distinction between being watched and being made visible. Being watched happens when you're seen by another person. Being made visible occurs when you're reproduced in video. The key to understanding people as watched is that they gather and concentrate themselves. You can see that the attention of this watched man is undivided. He is entirely devoted to his withering attack. There is only one individual here, and we know exactly who he is. He is the one who loathes surveillance cameraman. So, being watched means being a unified identity. And you see, hear and feel the singularity of the individual.
Fuck you. You got it? And the horse you rode in on. Jesus Christ.
People made visible are very different. People made visible offer no resistance. They are used for purposes their viewers determine. Because the visible can't resist, they're vulnerable to division. No longer individuals gathering themselves to say F you, their identities are easily split into multiple purposes. On one dimension, they may be sources of humor, comedians for us to laugh about. On another dimension, the same video images may be used in a document like the one you're watching now. Here, the people aren't jokes so much as test subjects and examples. On still another dimension, the same video images may be monitored in stores, and here the subjects may become targets for sales and profits. In 2 sentences, people who are watched are singular individuals. People who are visible are multiple individuals. The curiosity of surveillance cameraman is that he creates both kinds of subjects simultaneously. He sees people as watched, and he creates them as visible.
Hey, man. No, that's all right. Don't like my picture taken. Hey! Take off!
Is it reasonable to object to surveillance cameraman? The no answer starts with this. The acceptance of mechanical surveillance cameras, parallel with the rejection of surveillance cameraman, indicates that what people really object to isn't getting filmed, it's getting posted and viewed in places like YouTube. Almost all the video taken in our world is soon forgotten by the person who shot it. And, even if it is posted online, there are 100 hours of video uploaded to YouTube every minute. Given that reality, the chances that a boring video of a common man in a dirty pickup will ever be watched by anyone approaches 0. And if that's right, then objecting to being filmed in public is irrational. It's not a reasonable response to an intrusive lens, it is more like the symptom of a delusion of grandeur. It's insane for the guy in the pickup truck to worry about being sufficiently important for anyone to want to actually spend their time watching him. On the other hand, fear of surveillance, whether it's a man or a machine, may be perfectly reasonable.
Sir, what is your name? What is your name?
The woman asks, "What's your name?" Possibly, it won't be long before surveillance answers. As facial recognition technology advances, it may be that capturing a face is also getting a name, and an address, a social media biography, a consumption demographic for marketers, everything. If that happens, then resistance to surveillance becomes an elemental component of personal privacy. So, in a sense it's crazy to resist the camera. But, in a distinct sense, it's very prudent.
I think I'd like permission for you to be doing this, but I don't feel like granting that right now. So if you could stop and go away, that'd be great, okay?
Well, you're not doing anything wrong, are you?
No, I'm just having a really rotten day.
Oh.
So,
Well, if you're not doing anything wrong, you don't have anything to worry about.
fair enough. I'm not doing anything wrong, but as part of my rotten...
The Mexicans have a saying which translates as, "If you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear." Typically it's used in association with politicians who, like politicians most places, usually have quite a bit to hide. Leaving politics aside, and in an increasingly public world, Surveillance cameraman breaks questions about privacy in two. On one side, there's privacy as applied to things we don't want others to know about. And there's a different kind of privacy which has nothing to do with secrecy, which exists in its purest form when you object to being filmed even though you're just drinking a coffee.
What are you doing?
Oh, I have no idea who this is. What are you doing? Back off before I take that camera. I'm serious. You want to get hit?
What you doing?
Just doing some surveillance.
I don't know who the fuck you are, mister.
You calm down.
Fucking with the wrong mother...
Surveillance cameraman is aggressive and violent. He slams a camera straight into people's faces and forces them to see and know that their privacy is being violated. But what if he were more discreet? What if he did the filming from a lapel camera that his subjects never noticed? More generally, if people are filmed without their knowledge, if their emails are intercepted and their phone calls recorded, and they don't find out, is that an invasion of privacy? Here's a lawmaker who thinks it's not.
I would argue that maybe the fact that we haven't had any complaints come forward with any specificity arguing that their privacy has been violated clearly indicates, in 10 years, clearly indicates that something must be doing right. Somebody must be doing something exactly right.
But who would be complaining?
Somebody whose privacy was violated. You can't have your privacy violated if you don't know your privacy is violated, right? Can you?
I disagree with that. I mean, I think if the tree falls in the forest, it makes a noise whether you're there to see it or not.
Well, that's a new interesting standard in the law. We're going to have this conversation, but we're going to have wine because that's going to get a lot more interesting.
Here's the counter-argument from a news and satire website. Both sides are right, depending on how you look at it. In a sense, this is a form of the old monastic question: if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, does it still make a sound? On one hand, you can say that a falling tree no one perceives doesn't change anything in the world, so there's no way to know that it actually happened. Since there's no perceived evidence, there's no reason to affirm the sound is real. On the other hand, you can say that the tree fell, so we can use reason to deduce that there must have been sound, even though no one can verify since no one was there to hear. There's no easy resolution to the dilemma. But, the discussion does parallel the debate in ethics between consequentialists and deontologists. The question is, has your privacy been violated if you don't know about it? For consequentialists, the answer is, no, because we judge actions by the effects they have. If an act leads to a positive outcome, the act is good. A negative outcome means the act is bad. And, if there's no outcome, there's no act at all. In other words, things that don't have consequences never happen. This explains why it's easy to read a woman's diary you find in a taxi. Since you don't know the author, you'll never connect the invasion of privacy with a flesh and blood person. Nothing will change for her because you read the pages. And if there's no effect on her life, it's impossible for her to have been wronged. Finally, the idea is that when people are secretly filmed, the invasion of privacy doesn't happen until it has some tangible effect on their life, until it changes the way someone is treated, or alters what someone says. The effect may be tiny, but it has to be there. Until then, the privacy invasion is completely sterile and impersonal. It's an abstraction, almost nothing. In directly ethical terms, the conclusion is that your privacy can't be invaded until your real life is affected. On the other side, for deontologists, the answer to the question is, yes, because dilemmas about right and wrong ought to be answered in terms of what is done, not what happens afterward. Ethics is not about particular circumstances, it's about respecting the dignity of every individual in all circumstances, regardless of circumstances. So, when someone is secretly filmed, their privacy is violated. It must be, because that's the only verdict that holds up whether 1,000 people see the images, or one person, or no one. Since the circumstances don't matter, The conclusion we reach in one case has to match the conclusion in the others. Stated differently, everyone agrees that my privacy is violated when I'm secretly filmed and others see the images. And, if that's right, then our reason tells us that the same violation happens even if no one sees the film. It happens just like falling trees make a sound, even if no one is there to hear. The idea is that there's no ethical distinction between reading a diary that you found in a taxi, and sneaking a look at the diary of a friend. Either way, there's intrusion into another's life. In both cases, dignity has been violated. The only difference is that in the second case, the details are more juicy. Finally, in directly ethical terms, people who are filmed are wronged because they are being exploited as objects for surveillance. And the exploitation happens regardless of whether they, or anyone, finds out. In the end, the debate about whether your privacy can be violated if you don't know about it remains unresolved. What's certain is that you can't absolutely prove to someone that their privacy has been violated, without actually doing the violating.
Because if you're going to continue, we're just going to call the cops.
We just called the police then.
If you do not stop, I will call the police.
Okay. What are you going to tell them?
That you're recording me.
In public?
In public.
According to the Digital Media Law Project, it won't do much good to call the police. It won't because taking video of people where they should reasonably expect to be seen will not typically violate their privacy. By exposing themselves to public observation, people are not entitled to the same degree of privacy that they would enjoy within the confines of their own homes. Courts have held that there is no right to privacy attached to activities in the public view. So, surveillance cameramen can film in public without worry. What about this case, though? What if an iPad is set on a park bench, and one of surveillance cameraman's videos is played? Is it okay to film that, and then post it on YouTube? Apparently not. In an email, surveillance cameraman relates that he will only allow snippets from his videos to be replayed by others. And, he stands on firm legal ground. The videos belong to him. The images are his intellectual property. For that reason, the video you're watching now includes only quick segments from the original surveillance cameraman posts. Now, what this situation implies is curious. On one hand, people who appear in public may be filmed by anyone, and the video used in any way. You can follow someone minute after minute, record them and then post the results online. This is, in fact, what surveillance cameraman does. On the other hand, for inanimate things, the legal situation seems to be different. For a thing, like an iPad playing a video on a park bench, the scene may not be freely recorded and disseminated. Stronger, if the producers of this video set up an iPad, played surveillance cameraman's videos, recorded them, and then posted them on their own website, they would be sued. If they then went to court and explained that they were merely recording something in public, they'd be laughed out of the room. In the end, it is not entirely clear why privacy for people does not exist in a public place, but the privacy of intellectual property, like a video or a movie, remains in force in that same public space. Stated slightly differently, it's not clear why people in public aren't their own intellectual property.
Please stop taking my video. Now. If you do not stop, I will call the police. I may be in a public space, but I feel threatened by you.
I haven't done anything that's been threatening.
In what senses is filming threatening? There are at least 4. Filming threatens with revelation. For example, being revealed as essentially powerless despite the sharp uniform. Filming threatens with ridiculousness. Being portrayed as absurd in front of friends and strangers, forever. Filming threatens with distortion. It's always possible that words and images will be edited to twist and distort their original sense and meaning. Filming threatens with the unknown. Those who are recorded have no way of knowing when, or in what context, the images will turn up. Filming threatens with control. In the late 1700s, Jeremy Bentham conceived his panopticon. It is a physical jail and a psychological prison. The idea was to build a collection of cells around a central watchtower, so that the inmates were always and entirely visible to their captors. At least potentially, they were under surveillance all the time. In the late 1980s, Gilles Deleuze, and before him Michel Foucault, distinguished between societies of discipline and societies of control. A disciplinary society is one where our actions are restricted in physical space. Walls and specific places determine where we can go and how we are to behave. The walls are limiting, but what's really compelling in this kind of society are the rules that inhabit one or another enclosed space. All of us have had the experience of this kind of discipline. We all know that there are clothes we wear in school that we won't use in church. And there are gestures and ceremonies that belong in church, but that would be out of place in a bar. And there are rules for conversations with strangers that work in a bar, but that would only cause problems in a jail cell. And on it goes. No matter what the place happens to be, it's the rules of that enclosure which will determine how we are to act. A control society is very different. It is one where we are seen, or at least under the impression that at every moment and everywhere we may be visible, but we cannot respond. We are at the end of a recording tunnel where one or another part of ourselves can be spliced and edited and exploited by others for their various purposes. For example, I may be reading an article on the internet about the difference between disciplinary and control societies, and that may lead to a discussion of the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, and then to the common speculation that an element of his unhinged genius traced back to his infection by the sexually transmitted disease, syphilis. It's an interesting proposal, that the disease causes madness, and that the particular madness coexists with a kind of raving genius. I myself would be crazy, though, to type the question, "Where can I find information about syphilis and its symptoms?" into a search engine, because somewhere someone would connect the question with the questioner. And it would only be a matter of time before a private company would find a way to package that information for sale. Maybe a drug manufacturer would like to know about potential clients, or maybe a dating website would like to generate a list of undesirable matches. Regardless, in this kind of society we are controlled by observation. Whether we are in a library, or at home, or in an office, we always act as though we are under surveillance.
Do you like us so much?
Nah, you can record me. I don't care. This kid's a bitch.
I'm gonna grab that camera.
I'm gonna take a picture.
Bye.
Don't touch me, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Sorry.
yeah, that's okay. It's kind of hot out here anyway.
You know what? Just get away from my vehicle. What you doing? Get the thing out of here, you son of a bitch.
There is an etiquette of public filming, which is distinct from an ethics. Etiquette is the set of public expectations and rules defining social acceptability. It sounds like this.
You don't have permission to.
Oh.
We're not free subjects. You ask. Is usually how that works.
No.
Bye.
The task of etiquette is to discern established customs and traditions, and then to apply them to contemporary circumstances. Etiquette adapts old and traditional social rules to young people like surveillance cameraman, and to new technology like small and inexpensive high-definition cameras. In the end, etiquette is about fitting in with others. It's knowing, in the words of the man in the video, the way things are usually done. While there's nothing wrong with etiquette, it has nothing to do with ethics. Ethics doesn't start with other people and what they commonly do, it begins with individuals and their values. From there, what ethics allows is for people to understand and justify their actions based on the larger values that guide them. In other words, ethics is what allows anyone, or no one, to be someone. So, where etiquette begins with others and attempts to discern what they commonly do so that I can fit in, ethics starts with me, and arranges values to guide and justify how I will create myself in a world I share with others. Finally, in terms of etiquette, it's very difficult to turn in a verdict about surveillance cameraman's intrusive filming that doesn't include words like vulgar, rude, and offensive. He's a misfit and a loser, there's no way around it. But what about the ethics? In those terms, is it possible to encourage and justify the filming? Here are 3 ethical structures for approaching the question, 3 ways of thinking about how surveillance cameramen might respond to subjects who believe that it's not right that they're getting filmed, and who may feel strongly enough to attack their filmer with a chair. 1. Social welfare, happiness. This is possibly the most persuasive argument supporting surveillance cameraman and his filming mission. Here, the highest value is society's welfare and happiness. That means ethics begins with the ability to justify actions on the grounds that their overall effect is beneficial for the community in general. And the justification remains intact even when the specific acts seem exploitive or unfair. In the most direct terms, anything goes, as long as the consequences are good. The ends justify the means, as long as general social welfare improves. In the case of surveillance cameraman, he may be able to claim a simple entertainment value in his videos that outweighs the suffering of his filmed subjects. Within this structure of value, it may be true that the particular filmed people in his videos become angry, but that doesn't matter so long as there are many, many more people who enjoy the exploitation, and who can laugh along with it. Or, going in a different direction, surveillance cameraman may be able to argue that even though his work does some harm to the subjects he films, the cost is worth the gain. It's worth offending a few people in order to inform the rest about the dangers of surveillance reality. 2. Dignity, others respected as ends and not used as means. If the highest value is individual dignity, then ethics begins with the responsibility to respect the dignity of others. To be acceptable, every act must first be tested by the requirement that it not imply the use of others as means, as tools serving my purposes. Before anything else, others may not be exploited. Instead, they must be recognized and respected as holding an autonomy and a worthiness comparable with my own. For surveillance cameraman, this translates into a requirement to demonstrate that his subjects are not being exploited in his surveillance project, they're not being used as instruments or props for his own purposes. If he can demonstrate that, then there's no reason to object to his work. Unfortunately for him, the demonstration would be difficult. 3. Libertarianism, freedom and vitality. This is the most powerful, though perhaps not the most persuasive, justification for surveillance cameraman. It starts with the idea that the highest values are freedom and vitality. If individual freedom is a defining value, we may all pursue our desires and aspirations in any way we choose, and for reasons that we alone determine. The only limit, the only constraint arises when our free actions impede the freedoms of others. In other words, we do whatever we want, as long as everyone else can do the same. This ethical principle licenses surveillance cameraman, but only if he can make the case that his subjects' own freedoms are not significantly impaired when he points his camera. He might argue that the people he filmed were annoyed at that moment, but, really, little harm was done. Most of his subjects have completely forgotten the incident. It's doubtful that more than a few even know that they've appeared in a published video. Or, moving in a different direction, surveillance cameraman might be able to argue that even though his work encroaches on others now, in the long term it supports them. By graphically warning of the dangers of a surveillance reality, the libertarian cause is ultimately served more than it is harmed. Next, there's the vitalist component of this ethical approach. The theory here is that freedom only exists when it is used, when it is expressed by action. One way freedom gets expressed is by individuals creating projects that are not simple repetitions of those performed by others. There is, in other words, a kind of anti-etiquette in this brand of ethics. There's an imperative to diverge from the customary. And, if that's right, then surveillance cameraman's project is encouraged. His filming is funny, obnoxious, different, provocative, and justified.